Welcome to another episode of the brand called You, a video and podcast show that brings you leadership lessons, knowledge, experience, and wisdom from hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Today, it is my privilege to welcome a very dear friend from Montreal, Canada, Stephen Hecht. Stephen, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Great to see you again, Ashutosh.
Good to see you too. Stephen is the chief executive peacemaker of Million Peacemakers. He's the co-author of Nonflict, The Art of Everyday Peacemaking. He spent 35 years of his life on personal, business, and geopolitical resolution of conflicts. And most importantly, he and I are both members of an amazing organization called the YPO, which is how we know each other. So, Stephen, tell me a little bit about what you would say are three key milestones in your life or career.
A first milestone early on when I was 20, I had grown up in a family business. I was third generation. I was second year at McGill, where one of your children went.
Yeah.
And my uncle, who was my mentor, who was the president of the company, he was the eldest son of five. He passed away suddenly of a heart attack.
Okay.
And he had left in his will me the ability to buy controlling interest of our family business ahead of my father and uncles and cousins and siblings. And that caused a bit of conflict. So I would say my inability to deal with conflict, deal with the emotions of the grief of losing a close uncle and dealing with family members who weren't very happy with me caused me probably to become very stoic. And I dealt with things. I shut off my emotions. I became very task-oriented for many years.
Okay.
That would be one. Another one would be many years later, when several careers later as well, when after the Nonflict workshop had been successful, I decided to try in YPO. I decided to try it with a tougher audience. And I went to a Palestinian refugee camp with my wife and stepson. And I dealt with a very hostile audience. I'm a Canadian Jew, and we're on the other side of the wall now.
Right.
With activist women, and through a translator, the founder started in a very hostile manner to me. And after going through the workshop and 4 hours through a translator and breaking bread together, the founder came and hugged my wife and looked at me in the eye and said, "Thank you for being a friend to the Palestinians.
Nice.
We like what we learned. We're going to use with our husbands. But more importantly, we're prepared to meet 15 Jewish Israeli women. And if you could get Obama, Netanyahu, and a bus in the room, we mothers won't let them out till there's a deal."
Wow.
And that's when I realized I had in my hand, which is the Nonflict way, a gift to the world I needed to share. If they were willing to sacrifice being accused of normalization, collaboration with the enemy for the sake of freedom, the least I could do is devote my full time and attention to this. And I left my career in real estate to start a nonprofit called Million Peacemakers.
Amazing.
So that's the second milestone. And the third, and again, I'm trying to cherry pick a little bit. I'm an old guy. The third would be last year when we were asked to go to the Vatican to present the Nonflict way to 400 religious leaders of various religions and UN representatives on how they could use Nonflict to achieve any of the UN Sustainable Development Goals.
Wow.
Peace is only one of them, but there's conflict in achieving any of these goals, from climate change to equality, clean air, clean water. And we were the only non-religious group or UN-related group invited to do that.
Incredible. I mean, I've not met anyone who has actually built a whole NGO or a social, a social sector organization handling conflicts. And, you're doing that. So let's talk a little bit about resolving conflicts. Your organization called Million Peacemakers. You just spoke about the Palestinians, that where you went and were able to find at least people to start talking with one another. What goes into starting the process of resolving a conflict?
The first step is to understand, and the steps of Nonflict, understand yourself and the other. And that involves actively listening to them and mirroring, and you don't have to agree with someone to listen to them, but it gives them a feeling of respect, and it creates trust when you take the time to do that and mirror back the essence of what you heard, asking if I understood you well, and was there anything else? And there's always something else.
Right.
And then both parties do that. And often when we take the time to understand each other, we find commonality, because everywhere, no matter who you are, we all want the same thing. We all want to feel safe. We want to feel respected. We want to feel love. We want all these things. These are human characteristics we all have.
Correct.
We all want to have hope for the future for our children and grandchildren as well. Step 2 is to understand our shared reality. And we would explore what is our real underlying conflict here versus the symptoms of the conflict. What's our worst case, or what's working well for us? Because even if it's just we're talking to each other, and that puts us in a better frame of mind to talk to each other, then what's our worst case scenario if we can't resolve this conflict? How would it feel? Because often you need a real or perceived crisis to take action toward change. Then step 3 is to co-create our ideal reality. We visualize what is our ideal reality and how would that feel? What are the obstacles to achieve it? And then what could we do to take action to overcome the obstacles that we could control or influence?
Amazing. So, in any conflict, there are always at least 2 viewpoints. And both of them have hard lines drawn, refusing to accept the other's viewpoint. When you go in to resolve, obviously one person has to take more steps than the other person. I mean, I would imagine it does. Because someone, if a matter goes to court, one person is right and one person is wrong. But in a conflict resolution, you're trying to find the right in both people. Am I correct?
Yeah, so first, I don't go in to resolve the conflict. What we do is we give people tools to resolve their own conflict. So that's different than mediation. Because that way we could leave and they now have the tools to deal with conflicts going forward. And it's a co-created solution, but you can't get to the solution before you do step 1, which is to understand yourself and the other, which builds trust. So it's a give and take. It's not one has more power and therefore I'm going to put you down and I'm always going to win.
Okay. And help me understand, some of the tools that you use. I mean, if it's not proprietary or if you can't talk about it, that's fine. But it would be interesting to understand what kind of tools.
So the tools are things that are out there. They've been out there for many years. Active listening, I taught in McGill in organizational behavior in 1979 as a student taught course. Imago, marriage therapy, positive psychology, and coaching. These are some of the tools that make up the Nonflict way in the workshop that we do. Different concepts that we want to understand, such as framing. We didn't make that up. It's already out there, where you take the time to understand what is triggering you and what might be triggering the other person based on your life experience, your personality, your culture. These are various concepts that we go through in our trainings.
Okay, very interesting. So, when you go from conflict to nonflict, I mean, this nonflict is a word I'm assuming is something that you have developed and popularized, because, I have only read about it when you talked about it. But when you give a process to somebody, what is involved in those 2 parties sitting down and understanding what are my challenges, and then coming together on a table and talking?
So first, give credit to my stepson, Greg, for coming up with the word nonflict through one of our many brainstorming sessions, because there was no word for a resolved conflict, and we trademarked it. So what comes together is the willingness to engage. And often it's because we care about the other person. So if it's with my father, I would start by saying, Dad, I really care about you. I care about our relationship, and I love you. And we're having a conflict now, and I'm really uncomfortable with it. I'm losing sleep over it. Can we talk about it? And I've got this process here that I just learned to call Nonflict. And So it's one person reaching out to the other saying how this relationship is important to them, and you choose a safe space where you're not going to get interrupted, and that would be the beginning.
Okay. And before I move to your book, I would love to ask you one more question on resolving conflicts. And that is that without giving names, can you give me some examples of where you've stepped in at a geopolitical level or at a corporate level?
So corporately, we worked with organizations such as Danone, Spain, and in the end, they actually asked to translate our book, which was in English only, into Spanish because they found it so infected at the executive level. They wanted to bring it down to the levels where people didn't speak English. So they did the first translation into Spanish, and then it was taken over by Penguin Random House. Geopolitically, I can't get into really, other than say we work at the grassroots levels as well as perhaps other levels.
Wonderful. So, Stephen, let's talk about your book, Nonflict, The Art of Everyday Peacemaking. Tell me a little bit about this book.
So it was co-authored by myself and Dr. Amir Kafir from Israel, who had facilitated our first event that we took across Canada. So it came out of a YPO event when I was the chair of education for the Canadian region. And I, as I alluded to, had a lot of conflict in my life, both personally and business wise. And I was also interested in geopolitical conflict. And I found sometimes in conflict, you win the battle, but you lose the war. And I might have been a good negotiator and studied all up about negotiation, but that didn't really help in many times. So the event that we did won 6 international best of best in leadership development, which is a record for YPO. And that led actually with a bit of inspiration from you, because I met you soon after the event and you had your first book. And I said, you know what, a book is a good idea. And Amir and I co-authored. It took about 2 years to put it together. And we wanted it to be a simple, easy to read, easy to apply book. Any word over 3 syllables I questioned, because I found a lot of the books out there, and I've got them behind me, are by PhDs for PhDs. We wanted this to be very accessible to everyone. And an easy read with stories, and that's what led to the book in 2016 in English, and then actually we have it in Marathi. I have a copy over here.
Oh, you have Marathi also?
Abhijit Pawar.
Wow.
Abhijit Pawar wanted it for Tanishka Women and Young Inspirators, which are projects he took on. And then we have it in Spanish over here. And I gave the Pope a copy of this in Spanish last year when we met, and Hebrew for Amir. So it's also published in India in English by Jaco.
Okay, and maybe you need to look at it in Hindi then. And
maybe
we'll talk offline, and I'll introduce you to my Hindi publisher.
Okay.
Because that's the big market in India. So, coming back to your book, what is the impact that you are having in the Middle East? I mean, you're Jewish. You can see the incredible changes that are taking place in historic times with Israel and the UAE and Israel and Bahrain, etc. What do you think is happening in some of these countries where these conflicts are suddenly getting, I don't know if they're resolved, but people are willing to talk?
People in the Middle East, and I'll quote an imam who helped influence me, which influences step 1 of the Nonflict way.
Right.
I did another event before leading into Nonflict for the YPO group on leadership and religion. When he was asked a tough question, why is it invariably Muslim people blowing themselves up, killing innocent women and children in the name of Islam? His answer was, I could start by talking about our differences, and I might never get to our similarities.
Correct.
Or I could start by talking about what our 3 religions have in common with each other. And maybe, just maybe, the difference could take care of themselves.
Fair enough. One more question. When I was reading about you, you use a term called Nonflict Alexa. Tell me about Nonflict Alexa. When we can ask Alexa now to start talking about Nonflict.
Well, that started as a project when I met Stephen Baraki at a conference where he spoke on AI, and he had actually spoken at the Edge, a major conference for YPO in Cape Town a few months earlier, which I didn't know because I was at the Vatican during that. And I had that idea on how to scale to the masses because only so many people read a book, yet there are over 200 million of those other devices out there and growing rapidly. So I asked him if it would be possible, and he said yes. And we spent a lot of time, and he joined our board, and he introduced me to an amazing engineer from Amazon, Dave Russell. And Dave spent thousands of hours on his own as a volunteer because we're all in this, and let's see if it works. Alexa, open the Nonflict coach and continue.
Throughout this guide, you can either skip to the next part or try it out. To skip, you can simply say skip. If you want to pause the skill to follow the step, you can say pause. If you start to practice and find that the skill exits, you can continue. To continue, you say Alexa, open Nonflict coach and continue.
Wow.
Shall we get started?
Yes.
Stephen, please look at Ashutosh in the eyes and tell Ashutosh your facts and feelings about the conflict. Ashutosh, please actively listen to Stephen without interrupting, and when Stephen is finished, repeat back the essence of what was shared, asking, did I understand you well? Is there anything else? Repeat this until there is nothing else. Would you like to skip to the next step or pause the guide?
Incredible.
Ashutosh, please look at Stephen in the eyes and tell Stephen your facts and feelings about the conflict. Stephen, please actively listen to Ashutosh without interrupting, and when Ashutosh
Wow, this is
Exit.
incredible.
That gives you an idea, and it'll walk both of us through the steps of the conflict.
This is absolutely incredible. I'm going to try it
Using
on my
Nonflict.
Alexa now and see what happens. This is
Yeah,
amazing.
all you have to do is say, Alexa, enable the Nonflict coach, and you could do that.
Wow. Okay. So, let's move on, Stephen. Let's talk YPO, an organization that you and I both love. When did you join YPO and why?
I joined in 1989. I was 31 years old. My father had met a YPOer who recommended it, and a gentleman named Alan Maislin, who is quite a champion in YPO. And the reason was I was a young president feeling quite alone, and here was a group of people that I looked up to, many of them well-known business figures in our community. And I thought, what a great opportunity to learn more, because I believe I really liked the idea of the mission of YPO is better leaders through lifelong learning and idea exchange. And I thought I had a lot to learn. I knew I had a lot to learn, and that's the main reason I did.
Fantastic. And, over the years, you mentioned that you were learning chair and, you are part of the YPO's Peace Action Network. What made you give back so much to YPO?
The more I found, the more I gave, the more I got in multiple, exponentially in return, through great friends such as yourself. If not for YPO, I went on to India, and that was for the judging of the best awards, and with someone, David Kapoor, an Indian American, who changed my life. And actually, it was a YPO forum that gave me the courage to leave a secure job to start a nonprofit as well.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Stephen, tell me about the YPO's Peace Action Network.
So the YPO Peace Action Network is the first network that was ever created in YPO. Bobby Sager was one of the co-founders. He actually just spoke recently at the European Impact Summit. And the idea was to build bridges between members who come from conflict areas to understand each other, and then to, after taking the time to build trust and understanding, take action within the members and their families, and then even at the grassroots level. Okay. And we've done that with Indians and Pakistanis and Greeks and Turks and Armenians, Israelis and Arabs. Amazing. And I'm honored to be the vice chair of that group right now.
Fantastic. More power to you on that one. So our time for a few questions for you personally now. My first question is that what does success mean to Stephen?
Success to me is the freedom to pursue a vision which is bigger than myself, and then ultimately to enjoy the ride.
Wonderful. And my next question is, you you're one of the few people who has made such an incredible transition from a successful business into an area which is of tremendous need in the world, which is conflict resolution. Where do you draw your inspiration from?
We're often impacted by our relatives and growing up, and the stories I would hear of how they overcame hardship in Europe. All of them came from Europe in their early years, and they worked so hard. They left coming to Canada, and the trials and tribulations and how they built a better life, which they wanted for themselves and their children. So that's quite inspiring. And then you've got, as a peacemaker, Gandhi, who would have just turned 150.
My last question to you, Stephen, and this is that, all the exciting stuff that you're doing, talking to such amazing groups of people and resolving their conflicts, what would you say is the most exciting and challenging part of your work, if you deem it to be work?
If you never work a day in your life, and I certainly enjoy. I'm meeting incredible people every day, and the challenging part is now how to do all that in a virtual world. And that's where the great using technology in light of our reality with COVID and everything, and how we could be really great virtually.
Very interesting. Stephen, thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure speaking to you. It's good to have connected again after some time. And I wish you lots of success in every resolution that you're going to be resolving, every conflict you'll be resolving.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Ashutosh. Really wonderful seeing you again.
Likewise. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the Brand Called You.